Welcome to Cityworks Connect. Thanks for stopping by today to join us for our second episode. I am Cindy Curletti, a manager here at Cityworks in the marketing team. And joining me today is Matt Harman and Joe Pilimai. Matt is a business development manager and in our sales team, and Joe is an enterprise customer success manager. We continue to practice social distancing, and while we do so, we've got Joe and Matt are actually at the Sandy headquarters in separate offices, and I am currently in my home office, just about a block away from the headquarters. This next slide is information that we have to share, and it is for information purposes only and may not be incorporated into any contract. Today, we're going to be talking about open platforms and integrated solutions. And I'm actually looking forward to learning more about this. And so, Matt, I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor.
Sure. So, Cindy, this is open platforms and integrated solutions with Cityworks software. But before we talk about that, let's talk about this at a consumer level, because I think you're much more familiar than this than you probably realize. In the last 5 years, started years ago, but really in the last 5 years, I think this integrated solution has just exploded. I mean, almost every website that you go to that requires an account, you can log in with your Facebook credentials or your Google credentials. And I'm seeing how much I enjoy that. It's so much easier to just not have to register and so on and so forth. And that's really the pillar of an open solution, right? Using technology that's already developed and integrating it rather than trying to reinvent the wheel over and over again. And so, Joe, you and I, we like to ride bikes, and we road bike and spend a lot of time outdoors. And one of our favorite apps that we follow each other on is Strava.
Yep.
So have you gotten out on the road bike lately?
I have. As a matter of fact, I bought a new GPS head unit to track my rides. And funny you mention it, it was actually one of the key functionalities I wanted was something that would allow me to connect and upload my ride data into Strava. So I don't know if you saw my ride yesterday. I put in about 24 miles and felt pretty good about it.
Yeah. Strava is a great app. And what's great about it is you can post there and it can go to Instagram, or it could go to Twitter, or it could go to, there's a mountain biking app that I use called Trailforks, and those can talk to each other. And if you're not as familiar with Strava, if you use really any social media, this, if this then that, I post to Twitter and it goes to Facebook, it goes to LinkedIn and so forth. That is really what we mean by open and integrated solutions. It's the best of breed, so you get, and it's also an efficiency gain. You're only doing things once instead of, multiple times. So, Joe, in your role, let's look at this next slide here, because really, when we're talking open system, and you deal with a lot of our enterprise customers, so large cities, large utilities. So talk to us a little bit about this slide, like how Cityworks is an important part, but it's not the only part, and what they really want in an open platform.
Yeah, that's a great question. I can think of a few examples off the top of my head where this chart kind of really comes into focus. This is representative of small government, lots of moving parts, lots of points of data that are happening that mayors and city managers would really like to get control of. A quick example I have is one of my larger cities, City of Long Beach, is actually integrating Salesforce as a customer relationship manager with Cityworks. They want to be able to manage the contact between themselves and the residents or the citizens that are using their city for business. And they want to be able to manage the expectations on the level of service that they're able to provide. And it's really a critical point for a city like Long Beach to be able to use these different points of data between multiple systems so that critical decisions can really be made appropriately and, again, provide an experience for anyone visiting the city that they'll enjoy.
Yeah, Salesforce, we talked about that on the last episode with Josh, is how that really is where we really started transforming how we track our customers in not a negative way, just the data we need to do our business. And the leads that we get come in there through conferences. And a lot of that is, again, that open API that Salesforce has with other solutions that make it easy on us as a business to collect information that is important about our customers and potential buyers and partners and so forth. And so a lot of people may not be aware that the license key that you run to activate Cityworks looks at your Salesforce account, and that the products listed in there is what's generating that license key. So it's kind of another spin on this open technology. So Joe, again, let me go to this. This is something that I see all the time. So in business development, cities will put together a requirements matrix. Okay, and sometimes they're really simple. They have a couple dozen items. Other times they have hundreds to thousands of line items asking for all these little things and features that Cityworks does or does not do. And so undoubtedly, there will be a section on integrations. And so this is pulled from a recent RFP that I was reviewing. And yeah, look at this, right? Just indicate experience integrating with software listed and method proposed. And like there's so many systems that are important to cities that how do you not buy an open platform, right? That is scalable and integratable, if that's a word, with these other solutions. So before we move on with this, so I want to talk about how Cityworks supports this and get your take on it. But let's talk about the opposite of an open platform. And so if you industry term out there, closed platform, obvious. Another one that I like is the walled garden. So Joe, talk about the walled garden approach to enterprise software.
Oh man, you see that occasionally. It's becoming less often, but the walled garden really is that attempt where one solution can provide all the functional items you need throughout your organization. And whether that's managing, sewer operations, water operations, fleet, it's providing a walled garden that does it all, but really doesn't do it as well as it possibly could. And it doesn't communicate out with other systems as well as it could. It's funny you mentioned that walled garden. As I was looking at new bike computers, again, looking for functionality that would allow me to share that ride data out with other people, other apps, so that I could do analytics on my riding and how I could improve my riding. But also, what did it communicate with? Did it communicate with my heart rate monitor? Did it communicate with my power meters, my speedometers, my cadence meters? Was it going to allow me to use the equipment I had already invested in, much like that list right here? And there was quite a few units that I passed up on simply because they didn't offer that connectivity to what I had already invested in.
Yeah, it's such the consumer level, I think we can relate to this. And when we get into presenting to cities, like not the city technology people, the ultimate end users, right? The water operator, the public works crew member, the city engineer, the building official. When I explain our API to them, the term API is something that they're not as familiar with. So that is part of the goal of Cityworks Connect, is not necessarily just have a tech-heavy conversation, but try to put this into layman's terms so we can all understand what the solution offers. So an API is an application programming interface that lets two systems talk to each other in a supported way, right? Not through back-end updates of directly on the database, but through a service. And Strava is a great one because as an amateur cyclist, right, Joe?
Yeah,
we amateurs that's where we want our data, right? We want it in an app that we can then look at and analyze down the road. We don't want to have to buy another app specific to that piece of hardware,
Right.
you know, and so it's just a good parallel between what cities want to do at the enterprise level. So talk about Wonderware, the SCADA system, and how that really impacted you in, I guess, you know, the story of how that affected you when you really understood what the open solution could provide.
Well, it was a number of years ago. It was one of the first times I had really seen this kind of integration take place, but a customer had integrated Cityworks with their Wonderware SCADA system, and they had been using it to actually kick off work orders and inspections in Cityworks based on triggers and alarms they had built into the SCADA system. They actually were using a third-party system to manage those triggers. But the nice thing is it simplified the operators' lives in that they didn't have to monitor the SCADA system all the time to actually know that a work order needed to happen. The system could say, okay, here's a threshold, I've surpassed the threshold, I can kick off a work order automatically in Cityworks and dispatch it to one of the operational teams. And as I sat back and I thought about that, I thought, wow, you know, we're really starting to close in on the ability to allow, artificial intelligence in some ways to really start helping our cities and governments and operational teams to more easily manage all of the assets they have in their stewardship. So, you know, that Wonderware is kind of near and dear to me. It was one of the first times I really saw something that complicated simplified so well.
Right. Well, and the open platform allows the customer to pick their SCADA system, and then through integration, it works, versus Cityworks having to develop a SCADA system, which would be the walled garden model.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we are talking to customers and we see a list like this, the answer is almost always yes, right? We can integrate. It's more, how well does the other system integrate with other third-party applications? And so let me come back to my slide here, because we've got this nice diagram that we show all the time to help explain this. So Cityworks and ArcGIS, that bidirectional integration is what we code, right? That is part of the Cityworks solution. It works out of the box with your ArcGIS solutions and products. However, we don't develop a SCADA system. We don't develop a utility billing system. We don't develop a sensor network, right, to monitor pressure and other things in a water system. But our customers, much like you, Joe, you want your heart rate monitor, your power meter, and all that data from your bike to go into Strava. Our customers want a lot of that data to go into Cityworks, because that's the system of record. That's where we analyze it. That's what we need it to that's where we want our data.
It's exactly the same thing. Yep.
Yeah. And so what's cool about this slide is it tells that story of last time we talked about EURL on episode 1. If you want to learn more about that, listen to that one. We've also got a webinar on it. But the APIs, right, these are supported. So if you build the integration using our API standard, that's supported. That's a supported software. That's what we mean by this future-proof your enterprise solution, is build it to the standard, use the API, and then as we put out new versions, we will support that standard version after version after version. And we love working with other companies that have that same standard, you know, and of course, one of which would be Esri. So let's move up the ladder here to webhook. Now notice this is a kind of a one-way. So this is more bidirectional extensive data. This says one-way limited data. So webhooks are relatively new. In the last few years, they've started to, you know, people are finding this and using this within Cityworks. We're also enhancing it and making it just better and improving it, updating it. So Joe, your customers that you deal with, how has this changed how they're deploying and working with Cityworks?
Another great question. In fact, going back to my example of Long Beach wanting to have better interaction with their residents, they're going to be using webhooks actually to push data back to their citizen app so that they can update the citizen on trouble reports. You called in or sent a message to us that there's a pothole. We send information back letting you know that we've addressed it, we've fixed it, and that the problem's been taken care of. And the webhooks is a really easy way to set up that line of communication to push information from Cityworks out to the public or out to a third-party system to let them know something has happened that's important for it to know.
Yeah, so the main difference that I see with webhook is in Cityworks, we can hold that little bit of code, right, to call that third-party app or to push data to that third-party app. And I want to show an example of that right here. So this is Cityworks PLL public portal. So City would buy this and put it on their website so residents and contractors can apply for permits, submit permits online, pay for them, request inspections, and so forth. So I'm going to log in as my contractor, and I've got an issued building permit, and I'm going to go ahead and request an inspection. Okay, now over here I've got my text message. I'm an Apple user, so I have my iMessage up here. But when I request an inspection, so we'll just request this HVAC inspection for tomorrow. Watch what happens over here. We'll schedule this, okay? And it takes a couple of seconds, well, not even that. And I got a text message from Cityworks confirming the inspection date, time, and address. Okay, so this is really cool.
Way cool.
Okay.
Yep.
So now as a contractor, I got that text confirmation. Now this is a real common thing, right? The market and us as consumers, like we're getting text notifications. We prefer that over email notifications in a lot of cases. And so we wanted to provide that. So how did we do it, right? So rather than having to reinvent the wheel and recode a text service within Cityworks, we have a webhook that calls Twilio. Okay, so Twilio, I'm going to come out. So I'm now going into Cityworks. We'll go into Designer, and in the Action Manager, and we're not going to go into a lot of the Action Manager settings here, but this is where you can go and create a webhook. And here's my PLL text message that's active. So this is the API to Twilio where I'm calling to my account and using Twilio to send that text message. And so that, is so cool because rather than us having to figure that out, there's an open platform like Twilio that already does it, and we can integrate to that standard and offer that solution in a more simplistic and easier way. And then of course, you can see all these other webhooks that we've got built in here that have a similar functionality, a webhook calling Cityworks to do something a little bit more automated than it might have out of the box. All right, so that's cool. The other one that I want to talk about real quick, and then we'll wrap it up, is something that has been around for a while that I don't know that a lot of people know about, especially maybe some of the newer users, you may not know about it, but it's called the activity update on a work order template. So Joe, I know you had a couple examples of how this is being used. So I'm going to pull it up. So why don't you talk to us about how some of your customers are using activity update on the work order template?
Sure. Yeah, I think fire hydrant features is a great example too. With regards to my water and wastewater customers, more specifically than some of the others, they will have updates come out of Cityworks and update actual specific attribute tables within the GIS. And then from there, they'll leverage Esri's functionality to symbolize dates, material types, work time, whatever the type of repair might have been, and symbolize that within the map. What's really cool is the visual display of this data through the map helps work crews understand where work needs to be done, what the criticality of that work might be. But a lot of my really savvy users are actually leveraging that data push into the GIS so that other systems that also use the GIS data can also consume that information from Cityworks by using the GIS as kind of like that middleman to share data.
Yeah, perfect. So this, I think it's asset updates. I think I call it activity update, but the asset update is, it's real simple. It's in the template, the work order template.
Yeah.
You can add, so here's my attribute field, so condition date. Okay, and then I can push a value from my work order to that attribute on that asset in the GIS. And that happens when the work order is closed. Okay, and so what's cool about that, again, open platform, I can now do something in Cityworks and have it update my GIS with meaningful data. One of the things that I would do with this when I did projects is I'd put the last maintenance activity, so I'd create an attribute, the last maintenance activity in my GIS, and then the last maintenance activity date. And when the work order was closed, it would push over the work order description and the work order close date to that attribute. And that way, if I'm in Collector or looking at a different web map, or I'm not in Cityworks, I can pull up the asset and at least see that one previous activity that had happened on that asset. And so
it's fully customizable.
Right.
Yeah,
we can pull information, to our third-party systems, and that is the power of an open platform. And so that's really the message we wanted to leave today and show a few examples here. And if you need help on this, let us know. You can contact Joe, myself, pull up our contact info here, info@Cityworks. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I've got those integrated together, which is nice. Joe, we should put your Strava ID here. People can follow you on your ride. All right, we'll wrap up this episode and look forward to next time. All right, Cindy, you want to take us out of here?
Thanks for that explanation. Super helpful. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe and well. We'll see you next time.